this episode is a little more serious than some of the other ones we've done. Yeah, we still laughed a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that there's a kind of a content warning at the beginning of this one. If you're especially sensitive to really sensitive subjects, like there's mentions of suicide, maybe this isn't the episode for you, but still a lot of good information, and I hope that everyone who listens to it does enjoy it. Thank you for your support. Hello and welcome back to the Ludiverse podcast. I am Jay, your host, and I've got with me
Danny, his wife.
Today, it's a little more of a serious topic. I've got a fellow that I've met on Facebook, been interacting with in quite a few of the groups that I'm in. And would you care to introduce yourself?
Oh, yes. Hello, everyone. I'm known by a certain pseudonym that I'm going to stick with for now. People know me as Daddy E, and people who know me in the daytime, they call me Eric. And I won't give my last name because I'm also an activist and I work for the Canadian government.
Well, we are no stranger to the pseudonym on this show, so we fully understand the need for anonymity, especially in the professional world, which if it wasn't necessary, then a lot of this show wouldn't be necessary, so kind of a double-edged thing there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, just to specify, I would say that it's not necessarily anonymity as it is discretion, because my line of work involves me working with a lot of secrecy and a lot of confidentiality. And also as an activist, it's the same thing. And also on my downtime when I'm helping out people with mental health first aid, which we can discuss later, that also involves a lot of confidentiality. So I think anonymity is maybe a bit too nebulous a concept concerning what I do, and also professionally and personally.
Okay.
If that makes any sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense.
Because I have to wear a lot of hats with my line of work, professionally and personally. And so when it comes to information, it can be used as a weapon against others, and it can be used as a tool for good or for bad. So I have to use a lot of discretion in what I share and what I retain. Not to sound like I'm some kind of spy or anything like that. I'm not a spook, so to speak. Exeter, I'm sure, would say that I'm a spook, but yeah, I kind of beg to differ.
Start calling you OOE.
Oh, man.
All right. All right. You are wanting to talk about the mental health side of...
Okay. Well, I suppose the best way would be to start from the beginning as to how I got into this. The mental health thing, the training that I've done is by no means professional, but it is certifiable. It's something that anybody can do. What it is mental health first aid, MHFA, which is something that is done all over North America. I got into it prior to the pandemic. It was actually, I think in early 2020, like shortly after the holidays, it was available in my workplace at the government for free to help deal with the changing tides in the workplace. So how to better combat harassment, how to help people who have a substance abuse issue, how to identify but also help them seek guidance whenever. So people who want to come out but don't know who to speak to. So just being able to listen to them in a proper context, give them sympathy but not necessarily coddle them, not pretend that you're a professional, and just be like that reference point for someone who has a problem and want to at least point them in the right direction if you're unable to help their problem yourself. So it's a lot like first aid in a sense that you're not a doctor, you're not a paramedic, but if someone is wounded or there's a broken bone or something, you have the ability to mitigate the situation from worsening until a professional can take over. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, okay, so that's more in line with some anarchist street medic training that I've done prior. So it's kind of the same principle that I like to follow when it comes to that. I'm not a professional. I'm not the best that there is, and I make no false pretenses on that. But some people, they just want to talk to somebody, they just want to vent, or they just want to seek some guidance and some advice, and that's perfectly fine. My whole life, it's been like that. I'm an older brother. I'm a father. I used to be a teacher, and people just gravitate towards me for advice and, a sympathetic ear. So it just seemed natural. And the fact that it was offered at the workplace, I just jumped to it. And it was a couple of days of in-class training and some online stuff. I got some manuals And then I got hooked to it and I started doing it at work. I noticed there were some people who were having grief issues and substance abuse problems, and they just wanted someone to talk to who could direct them to professionals who can help them out. And that worked really well. And then the pandemic hit, and then the shit hit the fan, and I all got stuck working from home. I thought that was it. Then simultaneously at that time, I discovered lewd groups out of curiosity, because I'm in a lot of political groups for memes and stuff like that. And then kind of like lewd groups or just a Wikipedia article, you fall into a wormhole, right? And then, one leads to another, and then you forgot how the hell you got there, but you're happy you got there. I'm sure you can relate to that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
It happens to all of us, doesn't it? Like you're checking a Wikipedia article, about a movie that you have not yet seen, and then an hour has passed and you're 6 articles later and you're reading about nuclear fission, and you're wondering, how the hell did I get here? So I got into the lewd groups, hilariously enough. It was pre-pandemic, but just a little bit before, through a political group, and then they linked to another one and to another one, and then this one political group was, I shit you not, it probably still exists as well. It is a fundraiser for the Bernie Sanders campaign, and this one was, and this was people who are making lewds to encourage other members to donate to the campaign. And myself as a Canadian, I can't, participate in something like that. And I'm not a huge fan of electoral politics, but the idea was very amusing. And I got into it. I signed in, and then I saw the body positivity, and I absolutely loved it. And I started as a commenter, just started gassing people up. And I had noticed that there were quite a few people who had mental health issues, and they didn't have the resources or the finances to seek professional help. So I went to them. You would if you do first aid. I went to them. I asked permission to DM them, and then I did. And I told them, look, I'm not an expert, but I have some qualifications. And if ever, you want to talk about something, I'd be more than happy to help. And then one thing led to another. And then I eventually let that group a couple of months later, once Bernie dropped out, because then the group kind of just died out. It may still be around today. But some of them are still my friends to this day. And not just that, but some of them are also in other lewd groups. Then I got in those lewd groups. Then I started posting myself. And Bob's your uncle. Or does that sound very long-winded? Usually your interviews tend to be a lot of back and forth.
No, it's
You can edit whatever you need to do.
I don't know. I mean, it was a good story. I try not to interrupt. I try not to talk over.
Yeah.
And your story was pretty much straightforward, so there weren't really a lot of questions to be asked during all of that. But yeah, I've seen some of the interactions you've had with people in the groups that we share.
Yes.
And you're always super positive. You're like a one-man hype squad. And it's one of the reasons that I stay in some of the groups, because there are people like that who, like, somebody will be in, it's like, I know this isn't a great picture, but here's my contribution for the theme of the day. And then you'll jump in with, no, that's amazing. You look fire, and it's great, and we're happy you're here. And
I'm sincere. I'm sincere, by the way, when I do that. I never say anything insincere, because that's condescending and dishonest. And I am legit every time I compliment somebody. And it does take a lot of courage on there to post something. And even myself, I occasionally dive into it when I have time to do something creative and funny, because for me it's kind of a stress reliever. Just because when I work in government from home for the last 17 plus months and dealing with disaster relief, there's a lot of doom and gloom. So these lewd groups are a bit of a vacation for me, kind of like a coffee break. I'm editing stuff because that's my job. I'm editing a lot of responses that are very time consuming and labor consuming, and then I need a break, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to look at some, people who are showing themselves off and want some hype. And so I feel better doing that myself. There's a bit of self-care.
Oh, yeah, it always comes across as completely sincere. It never seems like you're just blowing smoke up their skirts trying to, it's like if I'm nice, they'll stay around. No, you come across as if you genuinely mean it. So that's definitely a plus.
Well, absolutely, yeah. Well, that comes with the mental health first aid. When people come to me, one of the first principles of it is that before you even begin the conversation, you need to assure them that you're in a safe place with them, and that you thank them for coming forward, for sharing this information. Because, myself having dealt with mental health issues in the past, you taking your guard down speak to someone who is more or less a stranger, if not a total stranger, it does take a whole lot of courage to admit that you need
it
help.
really does.
And so people, when it comes to lewds, it's the same thing. You're showing some skin, you're showing a vulnerable side to you that you otherwise wouldn't, and you're not entirely sure of what kind of feedback you're going to get.
All right. Well, it's like in the whole body image thing, having somebody to provide background positivity is definitely a plus, but it also will carry over into like the kink lifestyles, especially for people starting out, because like somebody goes from being in a vanilla lifestyle to like they've suddenly learned about bondage as a just a, and it's like
Yes.
I don't know if I can do that, if that's if that's something that's for me. And then you get people that the right kind of people, it's like, well, you can start off small. Here's this small Velcro strap. It's easy to get out of if you want out, but it'll give you a sensation, and you can go from there. And it's always good to have the support structure from the people that have been there, instead of other people. It's like,
Yes.
well, unless you go with steel shackles with a key that's across the room, you're not doing it right. And it's like, why?
That, and also people who take advantage. You don't want to start something where you have a person taking advantage. That's a lot of fear
Yes,
that I think
absolutely.
people going from vanilla to kink, they don't want to. They don't know how, and they don't know how to approach it because they're afraid that possibly could this turn bad because of getting with a toxic
Right.
person.
And it's funny too, because it's very fascinating, I suppose, or serendipitous to notice that I've learned some things about my own sexuality, and I've reconciled some other things as well that I've been previously embarrassed about, or even ashamed, by just discussing them with some people in my DMs. Some people who I have counseled myself end up counseling me. It almost becomes like a reciprocal, circular kind of dynamic, where I'm helping out somebody and I'm helping myself at the same time, unbeknownst, until it finally happens. So an example for that, if that doesn't sound clear to you, is just about kink. I had always, prior to getting into lewd groups, I thought that BDSM was all pain and humiliation and degradation and violence. And that was just something that I'm just not into. I was never judgmental about it, but prior to the pandemic, I was an amateur fighter in active competition. So I have plenty of violence. I train, 3 times a week on the mats or in the cage. I'm hurting people, and people are hurting me. I don't want to put that in the bedroom. No offense to those who that's what they want, but then it wasn't until I discussed that with some people who are very non-judgmental and open and much more understanding of their own kinks, only then that I learned that, there's actual gentle BDSM. And that's my shit. And it has been for years and years, and I had no clue. So that was like a very epiphanous kind of experience to even know that.
Yeah, a lot of the kink world is very taboo, especially BDSM. A lot of people think it's humiliation and so on. So,
well, just because that's what's most open, that's what's most in public view, and that's what the more vanilla or less initiated side see as the norm. In fact, it's just one part of a spectrum.
It's like 50 Shades of Grey. It's like you get so many people, and it's like, this is what BDSM is. And it's like, well, yeah. Yes and no.
BDSM being used as therapy to deal with the past, and you can't really.
Yeah.
I hate to sound vague in that one.
But, it's okay. But on that topic, on that subject for BDSM and for kinks, I don't know if either of you have ever read the works of Michel Foucault.
No.
Okay, are you at least familiar with the name?
No.
Okay, well, Michel Foucault is a well-known public intellectual from the 1960s and 70s, and was a multidisciplinarian kind of writer. So he would write about history, about sociology, criminology, and psychology. And just for the record, I know all this because I have a bachelor's degree in social sciences from like 20 years ago. I studied sociology and psychology and things like that. And anyways, just to go back to that, Michel Foucault is famous for two of many essays and books that he's written. He's famous for two in particular. One is called To Discipline and Punish, which is about the penal system and how it's a new kind of phenomenon. But the other one is The History of Sexuality. And it's a really great book. I recommend it. It's very accessible, even the English translations, because Foucault was French and he would write all of his works in French. He was also gay and into the BDSM scene in the 1970s, when that was still very much a taboo and something that was legally problematic no matter where he found himself. But he wrote something that really stuck to me in History of Sexuality. He wrote that, when it comes to our kinks, it's mainly a form of therapy, if I can just paraphrase, saying that whatever we do, especially for BDSM, whatever we do in the bedroom tends to be a yearning to fulfill a need that we don't have in our everyday life. So if I can make more sense with that, is that, for example, there's a reason why the stereotype of a sub is in extreme, BDSM is like a businessman who's getting his testicles stomped on by a dainty lady in her early 20s. It's because this is the businessman who's constantly in charge of everything he does at work, and he's always bossing people around. And so sexually in the bedroom, he wants to be mistreated, or he wants to be told what to do and wants to be degraded, because then he feels some kind of release in not having to make those decisions. The inverse is also true, because, at least according to Foucault, is that, for example, someone who works at a low-level office job and is constantly, berated by, mid-level managers who have nothing to do with their time, and, this low-level worker gets everything wrong, or they're completely ignored, and then they get into BDSM, and then as a dom, because then they are in control of the situation, they're able to inflict some kind of discipline on a willing subject, and then that is emotionally and psychologically freeing for them, because in the daytime they're not in control of their environment, but they are in the bedroom. That's something that always stuck with me, 20 years later since I first read it. I thought that was really, really telling.
It makes a lot of sense to look at it that way, and it's good information that, yeah. I had a train of thought and it derailed somewhere outside Albuquerque.
It's okay if that train of thought comes back. You're more than welcome to go back to this topic or to something else. Sometimes I find that when I'm talking on a podcast, because this isn't my first one, when I do, I tend to carry the conversation maybe a little bit too far. I guess that's the old part of me being a teacher, where, I have everyone's attention, and then I just go on and on and on and talk. And then I'll have a student interrupt me. Can we go back to, this certain point? And then, oh, yeah. And we go back to it, and then we'll discuss whatever.
Well, you've heard the show, but the way I typically do it is I'll let the person who knows what they're talking about just go, because you know what you're talking about. I'm just here to learn. So.
And I'm a fan of the show. I've been endorsing it, as you know.
Yeah, I see every time it gets brought up, you keep talking about how much you like it. So, and I appreciate that.
Oh, yes.
I want to see your show succeed as much as possible. And that's another thing. The mental health first aid is just one thing I do in my social activities, that has to do with mutual aid, which is an anarchist principle that I've been following very diligently for, about half my life, where as an act of service to someone else, as a kind of, love language, I think, brings a lot of, how do I say this? Brings a lot of goodness and positivity in the world that doesn't need to be relegated to institutions or governments or companies or what have you. That is something that we are ingrained as humans to do as social animals, and that we can all help each other out in some form or another. And so the mental health first aid is just something I do to the people who are in my DMs from loot groups and all that. Some other people, I've done other things. One person, because I'm an editor by profession, I can help people out with other things that their capacity very less than skilled at doing, I suppose. For example, there is a friend of mine who I counseled into a gender transition from female to male, and that person, I won't say this person's name or any of the people I counseled for confidentiality reasons, but this person is out now, so it's not a problem anymore. I just won't name that person. That person was living in a state where LGBTQ activities and organizations are often targeted by hateful people, and the local center where that person lived at the time was attacked. The car was damaged, and the facility itself was so vandalized and based. And that friend of mine wanted to run a GoFundMe to cover the cost for repairing everything. But that person isn't particularly by his admission, able to write anything that particularly well. And so I offered to write the preface for the GoFundMe to help raise the funds. And later for that person, I also updated his resume while he was looking for work, just by, editing the formatting and editing the contents to make it much more legible and much more accessible for whoever it is that you're sending it to. And other people too, I've also given them a bit of money here and there via PayPal because they can't afford their medical bills. These are obviously Americans who I'm helping out. But I've also here and there helped out some fellow Canadians and a couple of Brits as well. And so it's interesting how it was never my intention to get that involved with the people I'm helping out. But I suppose it was inevitable that I would get this kind of boomerang effect where I become emotionally invested in them and then you develop a lifelong friendship, or at least I would hope it's lifelong.
Well, you're definitely doing good work for people. The editing thing, while, doesn't seem like it'd be a major thing, can really help a lot. I do editing work for my friends who are writers, and I know what goes into that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've edited podcast scripts for people as well. And I've also helped people with their creative endeavors because I am an author also on the side. And you'd be surprised how, for that kind of work, for me or for yourself, it's something that's not that difficult. But for other people, you're really making a monumental difference, much like you mentioned. I mean, I'm not the handiest guy, but, if I got a problem with my car, I have a relative who will help me tune it up. And so that goes with a certain, mutual aid principle, like I was talking about. Or you may not be an expert, but you may still have some valuable knowledge, and you'll have some kind of willingness to help somebody out, and it can make a monumental difference.
Oh, yeah. It's just the way a society is supposed to work. Everybody comes together to share their skills so that, they all end up supporting each other. It's like if everybody had
That's
all
right.
the same skills, then there'd be no need to interact with each other. Society would stagnate.
I think Dr. Kropotkin was correct when he was just talking about how it is in our innate nature as humans to be cooperative and to be helpful for the mutual beneficial aid of everyone. It's just unfortunate that we live in a kind of society that frowns upon that kind of thing. Even the lewd groups, you think about it, for the most part, everybody gets along and we all hype each other up, but you will, on a regular basis, have these malefactors who come in and think that this is a substitute for a porn search, and then make demands on what people should be showing, or they make very rude comments thinking that this is, fucking YouTube or something like that. And that's just stuff as a mod. And the same thing, by the way, about being a mod, that's something I never plan on doing by my own. It's just something I fell into, much like falling into loots. I guess it just became this serendipitous thing. But, being a mod for 5 groups now and counting, I do take it very seriously because I want people to feel safe and I want to kick out those malefactors who are just not being helpful and they're making other people feel like shit.
Well, and we now with social media and everything, it's bullying and putting people down is a whole lot more easier than it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm a father. I have a daughter who's going to be turning 11 in a week from now. And I've had that conversation with her many times because they have sex education this year and they'll have it again in a few more years. And I already, got proactive and gave her some material and I had a lot of conversations. And one thing I talked about was about consent and about whatever's on the internet is forever. So you need to be exceptionally judicious with whatever it is that you share. So if you delete something, it doesn't matter. Someone else may have shared it and they shared it with someone else. And then on it goes. In Canada, we have some laws against revenge porn and laws against cyberbullying. That's because there are several very unfortunate precedents of teenage boys and teenage girls having committed suicide because of that. And that is something that in lewd groups I see from time to time, that kind of bullying. And I have no patience for that whatsoever. I have no time for that. And so it's a lot of work, but I know that it's going to make some change. And we as adults have to educate ourselves because today's kids have a lot more sophisticated technology. I'm 40 years old. I'm a late Gen X, child of the 80s. We didn't have that. I didn't have a computer in my house until I was in my early teens. Even at that, my family was, technologically a bit more well-to-do, I suppose, from a working class family. And so that is something that, in my capacity as a mod for these, groups, it is something that I do take to heart. It is a labor of love.
Yeah, it's like when we were growing up, you actually had to be kind of face to face to bully somebody, and now you just got to reach in your pocket and pull out your phone, and you can bully somebody all halfway across the planet in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do it with anonymity, even if you got like an alt account or something like that, or if you're on YouTube and you're just some random generated name that you've made as a throwaway account, and you can totally destroy someone's well-being, and you can even affect their work. You can affect their business. You can affect their school, and that is something in this new age of the internet, Web 2.0, that we need to be very, very conscious of. And myself, my government department, which I won't name, we do disaster relief, but we also do cybersecurity. And I have done some investigative work in a previous position. And it is a far deeper rabbit hole than most of us are aware of. Whatever is on the internet will follow you.
No, yes. We try and tell the kids that because we have a 15-year-old and a 13, and they have a tablet. One of them has a cell phone. So, we are very mindful and do, when they talk to us about something, we tell them you need to watch how you say things, not just face to face, but
Yeah.
online.
Because it's not like the old days where, in the 80s and 90s, pre-internet and even internet, 1.0, if you were having problems in school, if you're being bullied and taunted, you could just change schools if you had that option in your city, if you live in a large metropolitan area, and then you can just start fresh. But you can't do that now. It will follow you to every corner of the planet. And a lot of schools and school boards in my province, I don't know about Canada-wide, but in my province, we have a lot of new laws that have been implemented to help mitigate that. But the problem is that you can't quell it entirely. It is a constant uphill battle. And myself as a mod for these groups, it is something I'm very aware of, and it is something that I keep in mind whenever possible, that I can't make it all go away. I can't stop it all, but I'll sure do my best to ensure that it's as little as possible. In case you can't tell, I have a bit of an Atlas personality, which is that, I try to save the world, try to carry other people's burdens, and help people I care about, and even people I don't know. And, I suppose that's why I'm also an anxious person who can't sit still and I can't relax. That's my problem.
Oh yeah, well, got to make sure that you're keeping an eye on your own mental health while you're watching other people.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Back in the beginning of the pandemic, it was much heavier. When I would proactively go out to people and help them out, I had gravely sorry, not to sound like George Bush there. I almost said misunderestimated. It's underestimated. I gravely underestimated the severity of this situation for many of these people who were, forced to go back to work, even though there were outbreaks in their workplace. They didn't have the luxury of working from home, much like myself, or having a unionized job, which is something that I've noticed that, in Canada, I think something like 40 to 50% of the workplace is unionized, but in the United States, I think it's something like 10%, which is monstrous as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of these people they have to make that very tough decision of either feeding their families or, risking a life-threatening disease. And that was extremely hard. And some people were, and this is why I decided that, well, it's not I decided, this is where I suggested that you come up with some kind of disclaimer, is that, a lot of these people were contemplating self-harm. And unfortunately, I did lose two, or I suspect I did, because they never answered my DMs again after a while. And then that was like in April of last year, where I got very, very demoralized. And I took a good 2 weeks off from doing that just so I can recuperate. And I had some feelings of guilt, of not being able to help these people out. And then I talked about it with some other friends of mine, both in my life, here in my city, but also online, some people who I've counseled as well. The mutual aid fashion, it came back to me, and they were just consoling me, telling me that, you can't save everybody, and not everybody wants to be helped. Some people, they just want an audience, but they just want someone to witness, what had happened. And there's some of those things that I'll never forget, that they're going to stay with me forever. And, taking a few weeks off like that was something that I needed just for my own cognitive and emotional function, because I do have a life outside of that. I'm still doing a 9-to-5 job, doing serious stuff. And I'm a dad, I'm a husband, also an activist. It was affecting my activist work as well, the side. And it was something that I needed to do just to get my bearings in place and accept that, I have certain limitations that I need to respect out of myself. And I cannot save everybody, and it's not my fault. But it's also important that the fight keeps happening, keep doing what you can, because there's a whole lot of people out there who don't have a big support system, much like myself. I have
Yeah.
one in my own personal life, and a lot of people don't. And that's why, similar to first aid, you don't wait for the injured person to come to you, you come to them.
I see it all the time. I'm a medical worker. I'm a nurse's aide.
Uh-huh.
I care for the elderly, and during the pandemic, especially when family couldn't visit their family member in our unit,
Absolutely.
it did affect that. So the nursing staff, we were the ones that were having to be there
Uh-huh.
to get and so on. And even after we do allow visitors in certain parameters and all that. I still see some people who have no family that come and support them. It's okay, their family's paying, but they're not coming to visit them, and they're not
Yeah.
even 20 minutes away from them. So it's difficult. It's been difficult this past year
Oh,
for
absolutely. Yeah.
everybody.
I've also counseled several people who are in the medical field, much like yourself, both online and in person. I have some friends and I have a few relatives who work as nurses, they work as porters, they work as orderlies. One of them is an ambulance driver, a paramedic, I should say. And it's demoralizing and very taxing on those people as well. We are living in very rough times, and it's important that we look out for each other within our capacities and within our limits of expertise and our own, mental strength to help other people. And I'm sure that you've felt that yourself, where sometimes you just come home after a long day of work and you tell Jay, man, I had a rough one, and you two talk it out. Yeah, that's okay. That's a good
Oh,
thing to
yeah.
have. But a lot of people don't have that. So I noticed that. We'll reach out to those people. It's something innate that we can all do.
Well, it's definitely good to have that support in the home as well as in your professional life. But okay, so leaning back in towards
Yes.
the kink side of everything, which is kind of what the show's basically about. The need for good mental health support in kinks and fetishes is also pretty big, because it's like in a scene with a dom, suppose a sub has a moment where they flash back to a traumatic past experience and they start to panic. If they don't have proper
Yeah.
mental health support from their dom, that could just ruin not only the scene but like their entire view of that particular kink lifestyle.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I completely agree. Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up, that we're circling back, because this is a sexuality and kink podcast. Yeah, I agree that it's very important to communicate with your sexual partner, any kind of issues that may pop up, in a scene. Because just circling back to Michel Foucault, talking about our kinks, is that, our mental health, our sexuality are very, very much intertwined. And so it's important that, we have the right headspace when we go in. And then if at one point we have some kind of relapse or we have some kind of panic situation or guilt afterwards, that it be communicated with our partners. It's extremely important. And I speak that myself as a switch who once had a very bad sub drop. It lasted like a full day. And my early 20s as well, my first experience with kink, I was dating some girl in my early 20s who was really into hair pulling and choking and spanking to the point of, getting really big welts. Because I'm a big, strong guy, amateur fighter, and, it's unfortunately the kind of women I attract, at least before I got married, who were into that kind of thing. And I did not like it. I felt deeply uncomfortable doing it without any kind of, feeling of judgment on their kinks, but just, grabbing somebody's throat and choking them, with my hands to the point that they look like they're, going blue. I get scared, and then I get that dom drop as well. That's what they wanted. It's just something that I did not like doing, and I should have communicated that beforehand. I was just, in my early 20s, and I was young, and I was, game for experimentation. But then I learned the hard way But man, that was just not my thing. And that was on me to communicate that. And I've learned from that. Just as I think we all have through our own bad experiences,
Oh
we
yeah.
become better
It's
communicators.
just a matter of taking the time to both communicate your thoughts, your feelings, as well as taking the time to accept the input and listen. Not just hear. You actually have to listen to what they're saying because there's just too many like in BDSM specifically. It's like you got the dom and you got the sub, and you get too many people. It's like the dom will have to, the dom is in charge. The dom makes the rules. The sub just kind of sits back and takes it, and then they deal with the aftermath afterward. It's not supposed to be that way. Like
No, I completely
the
agree.
dom has the power because the sub chooses to give them that power.
Yes, exactly. I agree. Also, as a sub, you're also in a position where you can also be in a position where you are also dictating how you're dictating the intensity of certain acts. And as a sub, you're also kind of responsible to not demand more out of your dom than is beyond their comfort. So there is a lot of back and forth you should be having. Sex is, very much a conversation. You're having a tactile conversation with another person. And if you're not willing to have that verbal conversation before, during, and after, then you shouldn't be having that tactile conversation.
It's just as much as there's a lot of people out there that just even vanilla sex, they don't feel comfortable in their body, and it's hard to get that confidence to be with somebody because in the back of their mind it's like, okay, is this person with me for the sex or is this person with me
Yeah.
For me,
that sort of.
I think maybe they need to add a branch of the mental health profession that leans more towards like sexuality and stuff because a lot of therapists they'll help you deal with anxiety, they'll help you deal with stress, they'll help you deal with like past traumas and experiences, but I'm not sure how many of them are really capable of handling well, I like being tied up, but if I'm tied up with a specific thing, it
Mm.
triggers some kind of a back memory. So maybe it's something that should be included in that profession.
I'm certain that's already kind of underway. I think it'll just take maybe a decade or so before there is more representation when it comes to that kind of thing. I have, mind you, read about that kind of thing that is becoming more and more prevalent, where you're getting more specialized mental health experts. So you have psychologists who happen to be part of the LGBTQ community, and some of them are trans and work with nothing but trans patients, either male to female or female to male, non-binary, questioning, what have you. So at least then this way the patient is speaking to someone with personal experience. And it is the same, I think, with a lot of sex educators and marriage counselors. They're also learning more about the kink community and about BDSM so that they can hone their work. They can hone their skills to improve their efficacy with their work. And then you also got mental health first aid, much like what I'm doing. I think that if more people do that kind of thing with the proper amount of training, can do a lot of help to mitigate the lack of representation in the meantime. Because I'm sure in 10 years from now, this kind of conversation is going to be going the way of the dinosaurs, where it's going to be self-evident, where, oh, okay, I have a problem with a certain kink. I got triggered. I should see a sex therapist who is also BDSM certified, for example. I don't think that exists at the time, but in 10 years from now, I'm certain it will.
Yeah, see, it's going back to just the topic of sex education in young adults. Especially here in America, it's it seems, certain counties, certain areas kind of have dumbed down their sex education. And I understand families go to the boards and go, well, I don't want my kid learning this and this. Okay, but that's your responsibility as a parent to
Right.
also educate your child.
It's like the current generation went through all of the, I want to know about sex, but nobody will tell me about sex. So then we learn about it, and now we're all in a position where we can
Yeah.
tell the next generation about it. But because of the way society looks at sex as a whole, there's a lot of people that's like, well, I could tell them about this that I know, but what if somebody finds out that I told them and then I'm looked down on because I want people to, to like me, and it's like, who cares if people like you? teach your children. Make sure that they grow up safe, because then the next generation will know from the get-go. It's only going to get better
Absolutely. Yeah,
if
I
we
agree.
make it better.
Never mind the fact that now kids today, as I've mentioned before, they have access to very sophisticated technology that children and teenagers are children. It is this kind of technology that no other previous generation has ever wielded. It's such, consequence. And so it's not enough that you're just learning about sexuality through, sitting in the back of the bus and having a chat with your friends about something. Now you can access anything. You have Pandora's box completely open, and you can learn very advanced stuff. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
it is important that we arm them with proper critical thinking skills to discern what is very advanced, what is, beginner, and what is safe and what is unsafe. And, consent was never talked about in my time. It's amazing how many adults, my age, older, younger, who never even had that conversation. That is something that our predecessors have failed to instruct us upon. Now our society has moved on, and it is up to us to do better.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like getting back to the mental health aspects. It's like just knowing that you have the option to say no can do wonders for one's mental health. It's like if you're in a situation that you're not comfortable with, just knowing that you have that choice of, I don't want to do this, and it's your right to do so, can be so much better than, if I say no, is it going to be bad? Am I going to lose all my friends? Or, am I going to get trouble when I get home, and all this other thing?
Is he still gonna like me?
Yeah. And it's just, you got all these things. It's like back in my day, when a relationship didn't work out, we fixed it. We didn't split up. And it's like, no, back in your day, it was looked down upon to break up a relationship. So you were kind of stuck in it. So you either worked it out or one of you died.
Or you
Yeah.
had affairs, or you medicated yourself with substances to just get by in the day. Or you had more kids because you felt like, oh, having more kids will make the problem go away.
Yeah.
Yeah, sarcasm alert.
Yeah, so it's just like now that people are like, you know what, this relationship isn't working, I have the option to split the relationship and try something else. Like me and my ex-wife, we're better off as friends than we ever were as a couple.
That's good
Oh,
to
same
know.
here.
So I mean, it's like it's better for the kids because they're not seeing us fight all the time, and so the next generation's off to a better start because we made the choice of, yeah, okay, the Bible says divorce is wrong, society says divorce is wrong, but screw you, I'm going to do what makes my brain happy.
I completely agree. And also, just to extend that point, how many people did you grow up with who were clearly closeted? Because I'll tell you, growing up in the school I went to, there were plenty.
Oh.
And how much mental anguish could have been saved had they been able to come out or question their sexuality openly with their peers without any fear of consequence on the level of their peers, but also the institution of the school itself. Because here, the Catholic schools here in my
Oh, yeah.
province, the school boards have, been encouraging every school in my city, my large city, to have a LGBTQ plus club and outreach, but all the Catholic schools refused, even like for flying the flag during Pride Month. So obviously some work needs to be done
Oh,
there.
yeah.
I can see that the public schools, they're really picking up the pace and they're doing their work. And in fact, my daughter's French teacher is openly gay. And she even had her wife introduce herself in the virtual classroom. That was something that would have been unthinkable for me at her age.
Yeah, my baby brother is gay. My brother-in-law, I have a brother-in-law now, and I knew my brother was gay long before he did. Yeah, because anytime he went out with a girl, this was when he was a teenager, anytime he went out with a girl, it just didn't seem right.
Okay, yeah, you saw the
It
signs.
just didn't feel right. I could tell he wasn't happy, but I don't think he realized why yet.
Well, it's like I went through that stuff when I was growing up. This is like I grew up where it was like, if you were anything but like straight as an arrow, there was something wrong with you. And I would have thoughts in my head, and it's like, no, there's something wrong with me because I'm having these thoughts. And then it's been like 6 years now. No, 5 years. It's been about 5 years since I was like, you know what?
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm attracted to guys too. I'm tired of hiding who I am because I think that I should fit into this mold that I grew up in. And it's just like, I don't care anymore. I am who I am. I put out a Facebook post like, I'm not hiding who I am anymore. This is who I am. And, and then it dawned on me, it's like, oh yeah, my parents are on my Facebook wall.
Surprise!
But then I got like nothing but positive responses from them. And I'm like, all right, that's a big weight off my back.
It's a good feeling, isn't it?
But it's just like, it's looking back on, it's like I had these thoughts growing up, but I never did anything about them or talked to anybody about them because I had convinced myself that I was wrong for doing it or for thinking them. So that's why it's like my daughter is pansexual. My son hasn't quite figured out what he is yet, but he has a boyfriend. I'm not sure if that's a serious thing or not, but it's just like they came to me and it was like, yeah, I'm pansexual. Right on. Just doesn't matter what their gender or sexuality is, but if they hurt you, I will hurt them.
It's nice that you're pansexual, but you still got to do the dishes.
Yeah, you're pansexual, go wash the pans.
Yeah, you still got to mow the lawn. Yeah. You're not getting out of this.
So yeah, it's like I absolutely support my kids in their choices of who and what they are. It's like you can be anything you want, just not a bully.
It's okay. I mean, one of my daughter's friends is non-binary, and something in her family that they've been very supportive of. That was something that I didn't even know existed 15, 20 years ago. So it's good to have a very good support system.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, not many people do. And it just makes me wonder preemptively how many lives could we save by being more open and accepting of people's sexual urges and desires because they are so interlinked with our own mental well-being. It is part of our identity.
It's just like mental health is just so linked to every aspect of our lives anymore. And it needs to be more focused on.
Absolutely do agree. It does circle back to what I was saying about Foucault in the beginning. That sex is often a very therapeutic thing for ourselves. And if we deny ourselves of that therapy, then we are doing ourselves some harm on the road. And even from my own personal experience, because we're talking about sex and kink, my own self, I was embarrassed and even ashamed of my submissive side to myself because much like you, I grew up in a very blue-collar, hyper-masculine kind of culture where, no, you're on top, you do everything, and that's the end of it. But for me, growing up, even though I am this tough guy and I am, an amateur fighter, or at least I was prior to the pandemic, growing up, I was a bit of a sensitive, bookish kind of boy, and that got stomped and bullied out of me at a very early age. And so that part of my own sexuality was, like, as a kink to, be pampered or to be praised or to be gently dominated by like I guess like a motherly kind of figure, so like that gentle femdom. That was something that I had repressed for the longest time until I started talking to people in lewd groups, and then I realized that, this is actually kind of benign. It's kind of vanilla more than anything. It's not regressive or anything at all, and I just want some kind of variety in my sex life. I enjoy doing, dominant, stuff as in my role as a sexual partner. I enjoy that a lot, but there's also that submissive side where I like to be on the bottom and I like to be tied up or sweet talked and pampered and all that, and that's okay. I have a sensitive side to me that I am reconciling with. I'm not super open with it, but to the point now that I'm no longer ashamed of it, embarrassed of it, thinking that I'm some kind of freak. And in fact, it's okay to have a soft side, and it's okay to share that with people. And I've been able to share that with my wife as well, and we indulge in it from time to time. I think as a switch, I like a 50-50 kind of proportion, but so far it's like 90-10. But to think about it, just prior to the pandemic, it was like 99-1. My wife is pretty vanilla, and I don't push it to her comfort level. I like to go at it easily, and we communicate. And I think that's important for any kind of sexual relationship, as we discussed many times in this podcast. It's really important to communicate your comfort, your desires, and your level of satisfaction. That being honest is very beneficial. It's just a matter of being able to phrase it in the proper kind of tone so that it's not accusatory and it's not humiliating or causing any kind of undue distress.
Yeah, because a relationship, it's two people, it's not one.
Well, unless you're polyamorous, then it's more.
You beat me to it. Yeah, you beat me to it. If it's poly, then it's more. So sex is a conversation. So you got to have that verbal conversation before you get
Absolutely.
into that tactile.
Oh, yes.
I bring it back to fighting as well because I've been a lifelong, martial artist and combat sport participant for, I don't know, about 25 years or so, if not 30, is that fighting, much like sex, requires consent. If you don't have consent and you don't have agreed upon rules of engagement, it is assault. So you need to have that conversation beforehand and make sure that everybody's on the same page
Yes.
before you start swinging.
So, is there anything in regards to mental health in kink and fetish lifestyles that you think like that hasn't been gone over that you think needs to be mentioned?
Well, I think that if you're going to be an ally for the LGBTQ community, LGBTQ plus, that's what we call it in Canada and the Canadian government. If you want to be an ally, it's important not be overbearing or too eager to give advice that you are not qualified to give. To be an ally is to be receptive and to listen to someone who is pouring out their thoughts and their feelings. And a lot of times you can't help them other than by listening. It's important not to give too much advice that from your own lack of experience, can be potentially harmful. So the best that you can do is to listen to that person's thoughts and tell them, thank you for coming out to me, or thank you for sharing these thoughts. Then ask them, how can I help? I think that's really, really important. And this also extends itself to racial issues as well. If you're a white person, don't tell a person of color how to behave. Don't tell them how to fight a certain kind of struggle. They're trying to figure it out themselves, or they already have it figured out and want someone who will listen to you. And so I think that's very important because I'm cishet and I'm male. I can only have enough life experience to help you out, but I can get in touch with other people if that's what's necessary. There's a very popular, well-quoted saying by one of my favorite writers, is an anarchist writer named Mikhail Bakunin. He says that I'm paraphrasing here, it says, on matters regarding boots, I consult with the boot makers. That means is that you leave it to the subject matter experts. Some things that you can't do on your own, and that's okay. For mental health first aid, it's the same thing. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a paramedic, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a psychologist. I can help you in a certain capacity, but if I can't, I'm not admitting defeat, I'm not admitting failure. I'm telling you, okay, let's hit the pause button, let me look into it, and let me find someone who can help you out. Who's a bit more specialized on that. I think that would be my best advice. For anybody who wants to be a good ally, it's important that you reinforce your friends with the right coping mechanisms and the right access to information so that they can make their own decisions or seek help at their own discretion. It's a decision that they have to make. Never out your friends when they're not ready to be outed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And in regards to the levels of discretion that have to be observed due to your job and all that stuff, are there any links or anything that you would want to share with the audience? The names of groups that you're part of that you think they'd be interested in?
Okay, well, if you're into the Facebook thing with the lewd groups, I strongly recommend you look into mom bods are the best bods and dad bods are the best bods. I'm a mod in both of them. I helped actually found both of them because I had noticed in the lewd groups that I stumbled into in the beginning of that rabbit hole, there were a lot of self-conscious moms who felt, a lot of body issues regarding their physicality and the permanent changes that come after giving birth. And a lot of them really needed that hype. And, I guess because it also corresponds a bit with my own kind of kink with gentle domination, I love that motherly kind of look. I like that kind of physique. And so I would always proactively hype them up and tell them that mom bods are the best bods. And in fact, I've noticed too that there are a lot of men who have signed into that kind of group. They're men like myself. They're men who like women who look like their wives and also want to encourage their wives, girlfriends, etc. to join and hype them up. And I think it's really blossomed itself beautifully in the last, 13, 14 months since it's been there. So if anybody listening, if you're a mom, or you're pregnant, or you have a wife or girlfriend who is a mom and they're having body issues, pick them up and have them come into the group. Just lurk around a little bit if they want to see what it looks like. It's a safe place for everybody, and you will be given all the love and attention that you are owed, that you've earned rightfully. It's important also that I think mothers make sure that they still respect their own sexual well-being and their own mental health that comes with bodily changes after giving birth, and that you're a mother, but you're still a sexual person, and you still have needs and you still have desires. And that goes for dads too, but to a lesser extent. I think as men, we are, like cis het men, we're all kind of pre-wired for strong sexual urges all the time, so can't get it up anymore. And we invented, Viagra in the mid-90s to fix that problem. The message really goes out, but also a lot of men have body issues, and I had body issues growing up as well. And so it's important that we hype men as well, and men are less reluctant to speak about their mental problems as well. So that has its own challenges. So I do counsel men and women, and that also includes my LGBTQ friends. And if any of them have, a problem that's a bit more specialized, I can help them get in touch with somebody who could help them with much more experience that is beyond my reach.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and add links to those groups in the show notes at the end of the show. I wanted to thank you for coming on and talking with me.
I hope this podcast wasn't too doom and gloom and too serious, because your other segments seem to be, a lot more light and a lot more fun.
Well, when the subject matter is serious, it's good to keep it, rather serious, because you joke too much about it, then you start losing the
It trivializes the problem.
Right. Yeah. And if you try to make everything all fun and laughs and happiness, then somebody's going to be convinced that that's all the world is, and it's going to bite them in the butt.
Oh, yeah.
But,
absolutely, I
and
agree.
if you decide you want to come back on and talk about something else, let me know. I'd be more than happy to have you back.
Sounds great. Appreciate the time you've taken, and I appreciate talking to the two of you. It's been good to learn something.
We appreciate it.
All right. And if anybody out there has any suggestions or questions or wants to be on the show for anything, you can go ahead and get in touch with us. Twitter, Facebook, email, ludiversepodcast@gmail.com. I want to give a shout out to financial supporter, Zachary Hale. I recently purchased a new microphone. So once I get that working, I actually should be getting better quality. So thank you to him for that. And until next time, keep communicating, keep each other safe, and always remember to have fun.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Ludiverse. If you have any questions or comments, contact us on Twitter or Facebook. Just search for the Ludiverse. Remember to rate and review wherever you listen. If you want to help support the show, please consider donating to our Patreon.